Mr. President, if I could just start with a very simple question.
Yep, any question you like.
How are you?
Okay. Are you sure that that is simple question? I think it's one of the difficulties. I don't know. I think I'm like Ukraine, so it's difficult, tough situation, and big tragedy, but we are strong. So I can't find the right word in English. How are we? I'm like our people. I think I'm in the same level, with a strong spirit, ready to fight for us, just for our families, for people, for country, for everything what belongs especially to us. We don't need anything, you know, of somebody. I mean, that we just need our, that's it.
So a simple question with the hardest answer. I think the world has been struck by the resilience of the Ukrainian people. And I would, if you could, take me back to that day, the 24th of February, those first hours of the invasion.
Another life.
Another lifetime ago. Take me back to those first moments, how you piece them together, how you remember them.
Я погано пам'ятаю вже той день.
Well, frankly speaking, I don't really remember that much the day of the 24th of February. And on that day, Russia has changed the lives of all the Ukrainians and of the life in the territory of Ukraine. And later on, we realized that it wasn't only for Ukraine, but for the rest of the world. And before that day, I was a president of my country, living with my own family. And after that, I've become a president of the country at war, of the nation at war. And I was there with my nation, and then there was family.
Ось приблизно так. Now family is not with me, so now I mean, sometimes I can see them, but sometimes, and so, тобто раніше питання мого сину було.
I mean, earlier, I usually had a question from my younger child, a boy, and he would call and ask me, what time are you planning to get back home? And now the questions are all over the phone, and he might just ask me, okay, when will we have a chance to see one another? Yeah, there's no pity about this situation, and it is an honor for me to stay as the president of my country in this time of hardship for Ukraine, and it's a great honor to be a president of the country at war. Of course, I would really like to stay more as the president of the country at peace. But it's important to have the right people in the right places, those who do believe in the future, and there will be definitely a future for Ukraine. So I got up in the middle of the night, just as many other parents, and I've seen some distant sounds. Well, those sounds may look similar to the applauds, but those were not applauds, those were explosions. And when we arrived to the Bankova Street, this is where the office of the president is located. And at that time, there was no light in this place because of the war has started.
Wow, and on your family, I mean, you must miss them, and I wonder how close did Russian troops come to finding you and your family, and how does that feel to know that a Russian strike force is hunting to capture or kill your children? How does that feel as a father?
Як будь-якого батько, але з одним але. Тобто...
Well, there was one but, let's say, because during the times of this attempted occupation of the Kiev and the occupation of the Kiev region, there were missiles hitting the Kiev, and at that time, every father would be taking care or thinking of his own children, of his own family. Now, in my case, there was this but, because it was my wife who had to take care of the children, and I had to go into this place because I am the president of this country, so I had to think of more other issues. At the same time, I was feeling worried, of course, because the war was in place, and it continues now. And of course, for the children, they were attracting more of an attention. Besides, they were being the targets. They had some security details.
Скажімо так, є такою мішенню, і тому
Of course, that had an impact, and I would say that they grew older, mature, so to say, like young children, but becoming older in terms of their experience.
Вони стали дорослими людьми з дитячим віком.
Robbed a bit of their childhood, perhaps. How do you see this ending? And this is another very big question, but how do you see this ending? How long could this war last?
Залежить від того, чи будемо ми сильними на полі бою.
It all depends on how strong we are on the battlefield, and that requires a joint support from the whole world. And we'll also be strong when Russians will be weak, meaning that when we will receive the support in terms of the weapons and all other types of support for us, when we will not have the situation when Russian forces are having 10 or 20 times more of the personnel or the weaponry, when there will be sanctions imposed against the Russian Federation, when there will be further support and financial support to Ukraine, when Russia would feel isolated, when there would be no visas for the Russian citizens, when the leaders of the foreign countries would not be meeting with the Russian leadership, when Russia would feel as if they're left alone, because there's something that the Russian leadership is afraid, and particularly they're afraid of their own society, and the president of Russian Federation is afraid of his own society. He wants to have a long life, and I guess that's why he's taking such a long table whenever he is meeting with anyone. So when it will have all these strengths, then it would allow us to finish the war, to have this war finished in a shorter period of time. And I would also like to say that when Russians would be on retreat, it is in that case then we would be able to start negotiations with them, and not just to respond to whatever ultimatums they might have for us.
Закінчення війни.
I want to pick up on a lot of what you said there, and we'll discuss definitely support and military support and what more, New Zealand can be doing as well. But as far back as April, you were worried about fatigue. How troubled are you now, 6 months into this war? How troubled are you that the world's attention is waning?
Дуже стурбований.
I do feel very worried, and this is a challenge. This fatigue issue is a challenge because every country has its own internal issues, internal matters to settle. You take COVID, you take the energy crisis, you take the seaports of Ukraine being blocked in the Black Sea, resulting in a food crisis in some of the countries of the world. Now, Russia is attempting to switch the attention of the many countries in the world to some other issues, to some other challenges, and that's in fact part of Russia's hybrid tactics by switching to the other problems. And I mean, if the country is located far away from Ukraine, as in the case of New Zealand, we do grateful for the support they are providing, but still they are located far away, so they might think that it's a far away issue. But still, we're not willing to have this war spreading on other territories, as could easily happen. And that is why it's important that we receive the support. It's important to end this here and now, because the war would be spreading like a cancer. And we know this President Putin, and we know this President of a long table, so to say, and his intentions as to that matter.
Well, let's touch on that. What would you say to people in New Zealand who feel like they're a world away and New Zealand has its own problems? Inflation, COVID, as you say. Why should New Zealanders care about what's happening here in Ukraine?
Вони повинні зрозуміти, є які на деякі речі відстань ніяк не впливає.
Well, I would say that it's important to understand that distance matters not in cases of war like that.
Європейські держави абсолютно
I can give you several examples. You can take the energy crisis, and it was artificially created by the Russia for the European countries. Or let's take another crisis, the food crisis, that was also created by the Russian Federation. And it has an impact on the countries in Asia, on the countries in Africa, which are located further away from Ukraine. But still, there is an impact. I can give you one more example. Russia keeps shelling the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia, which is 6 times larger than the one in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. And the wind, it also has no limitations in terms of the distance, and imagine the impact of that. So I just want to underline this issue that the war, it has no distance. And today it's also important to understand that the autocracy, it should not prevail, because if it would prevail in Ukraine, then the other autocratic countries would consider that they can do something like that. There would be no punishment for something like that. And in that case, there could be other wars or other situations like that in the other continents. So this should not be happening.
Це може прийти у будь-який континент, будь-якій державі.
Let's pick up on the rocket strikes at Zaporizhia. What could the consequences be of further strikes at the nuclear power plant?
Сама руйнація атомного.
Well, that may result in the damage of the nuclear power plant as well as, of course, the nuclear explosion. And I would like to remind you the situation that happened in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. That's another one in 1986. Now, still, the large territories of our country, just as others, are turned into exclusion zones. There are no people could be located in there. And once again, a few more words speaking on the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. When the Russian forces took control over that territory, now, most of them have died without any shots being fired because of their operations, because of what they've done in the Chernobyl. Now, the same thing might be happening in the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, although the consequences, the scope of the consequences might be much greater. And I mean, we're talking here, we're saying some words, but in fact, the consequences might be a lethal one. And we have a situation when the cruise missiles are being fired over the top of the nuclear power blocks. And this might be resulting in a nuclear explosion. So this is another way of a nuclear weapon. When they had these combatants on the territory, and the militants on the territory of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, they've produced a lot of consequences out of their actions. And when we've managed to liberate this territory, fortunately we've did so, and we've managed to eliminate the consequences of whatever actions they've taken. But should you take the situation with the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, it has 6 blocks, not 1. And our Ukrainian experts are remaining on that territory of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, being taken as the hostages, because the militants, the combatants, they're not allowing them to move out of the nuclear power plant. Still, they realize that they should stay in there to prevent whatever catastrophe that might follow.
Може статися трагедія.
Thank you. Can we talk more about the fatigue, the fear of the world's attention waning? Why is it so important for world leaders to see firsthand what is happening in Ukraine? Because on the same day that you invited the Australian Prime Minister to Ukraine, you invited the New Zealand Prime Minister. Australia said yes, New Zealand said no. Should Jacinda Ardern, our Prime Minister, have come to Ukraine?
Я запрошував прем'єр-міністра Нової Зеландії.
Indeed, I have extended an official invitation for the Prime Minister of New Zealand to arrive. And I understand there were some issues preventing the arrival of the Prime Minister to Ukraine. But at the same time, we had a phone call. It was an absolutely positive phone call. So we've exchanged a lot of issues over the phone. And we have received some support both from the private and the public sector. I think the support amounts to $20 million. And still, as we are the country of war, we would be always looking for support and welcoming the support that could be provided to Ukraine. Now, the scope of support, the amount of support, it depends on the level of support coming from the society. And the society is looking at their own leaders. And the Prime Minister of Australia, when he came in, he voiced this support coming from his country. And he also said that New Zealand is offering the support to Ukraine. And we can feel it, but it's really important that the leaders of those countries would be able to come to Ukraine and see something with their own eyes, because that would allow them to have a profound understanding of what the needs of the people of Ukraine are at these hardship times.
Не будеш розуміти цю проблему.
So she should come, Jacinda Ardern should come to Ukraine?
She's very welcome. She's welcome. Yes, of course, with pleasure.
And you want her to because you think it's important?
I think it's important. I think important for us and important for every leader. I think to understand the scale, to understand the scale of the war.
Do you take it as an insult that she said no?
No. She described me the situation, and it's okay. She said that she will find time and will come, and I said also that I've never been to New Zealand. So after the war, with pleasure. But now the war is here, and we need help.
You will be
concretely here.
You'll be very welcome in New Zealand.
Thank you so much.
In that phone call that you had with the Prime Minister, that was on the 30th of June.
Yeah.
According to notes from her office of the call, you told her that ongoing support would be necessary, and she expressed support for that. New Zealand's done nothing since that phone call.
Мені складно прокоментувати підтримку.
Well, it's hard for me to comment on that because, of course, we are happy with whatever support we are receiving.
У нас є.
And, well, if the support will arrive, then, of course, it's great. But it's very hard to comment on that.
Зеландії, тобто ж, як буде? Що я можу сказати вам чесно, як буде?
New Zealand has only provided $7.5 million in military support, and lethal military support. It's about 177 million hryvnia. How far does that go?
It can be about 3,000, something like that, 3,000 shells.
3,000 shells?
Yes.
So it's not a lot.
It's not even a day of the war. It's not. It's not enough for the day, for example, for one day. But it's so. I mean, it's not. I have no questions to New Zealand. I mean that you asked what we can buy. I know what we buy. I mean that so.
Because that support, the lethal military support.
Maybe they can't. I mean, they give more. So, I mean that's why the war is far from New Zealand. So I mean that to understand the deepness of this tragedy and problem, it's to be here. That's why I can invite you. That's why I want to thank you and journalists of New Zealand, because of course the information is quicker than people. So I mean that you can give people right messages. Right messages for me is true messages.
Well, it feels really important to be here as well and see it for us. So the invitation, just to be clear, the invitation is still open to Jacinda Ardern?
Of course.
And she's indicated that she might come, maybe later?
Yes, I think she said yes. She will when she will find possibility. She will.
We'll keep asking her for you.
Thank you so much.
The $7.5 million that we committed in lethal military support, that was back in April. We haven't committed a cent more to lethal military support since then. Should we?
Ми розраховуємо на кожну державу.
Well, of course, we count on the support that could be provided from any country. And I've given you an example for the pricing of one artillery shell, and the war is still in progress. And besides, we're using 5 to 6 times a smaller number of artillery shells if compared with the Russians, because the Russians have their own enormous amount of supplies.
І тому нам потрібна допомога світу проти боротьби з цією навалою.
Because per capita, New Zealand has given far less military support than our Five Eyes partner. New Zealand has given just €3 per capita. At the other end of the spectrum, America has given €71 per capita. The global average, €29. Do we risk being on the wrong side of history here?
Surely not. It's not the case that New Zealand is on the wrong side, because on the wrong side is the Russian Federation and those countries who are trying to balance, who are not recognizing the fact of aggression. And we don't have any issues with that, because the New Zealand has a very clear position with regards to that. But history remembers everything. So it might be the case that those numbers, those figures that you've mentioned, they will be simply written in the history when some of the countries were allocating something like $30, but New Zealand have allocated that amount of money. I mean, everyone allocates the amount of money they have or they can possibly take, but this is what could be written in the history.
I think we can do more. We have sent more.
We do believe.
We have sent military personnel as well who are helping with training and intelligence support for Ukraine. Our elite SAS Special Forces soldiers, they are some of the best in the world. Could they help in any capacity inside or outside Ukraine?
На території Прибалтики дійсно.
Well, on the territory of the Baltic countries, your personnel, your experienced personnel, it did engage in the training for our men and women, and hopefully this training mission would continue.
Надіюсь, що вона буде продовжуватись і поширюватись.
These are our special forces soldiers. Are they helping with training?
Це якраз наші сили спеціальних
Yeah.
операцій. Вони долучаються до процесу.
Yes.
We have New Zealand SAS soldiers supporting the war in Ukraine.
You know, I mean that I have information from our soldier that you have these high-level people. I mean that, and they already gave help and training missions on the territory of Baltic countries to our people.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you tell me any more about their operations, how many there are, or where they're based exactly?
It was about, I think, 20 people. It was about 20 people.
And are they still there?
I don't know. I don't know. We have such, you know, як досвід, да?
Experience.
Да. Тобто у нас з багатьох держав.
Well, we're not spreading too much of details on that, but we do have experts from Special Operation Forces or some other military experts coming and training our personnel on the territory of our partner countries. They're training and conducting military operations and doing some demining. And we are, of course, very grateful to our partners for organizing those training missions.
Місіями ми за це дуже вдячні.
And if they're, so I'll clarify with our government if they are the SAS soldiers, but if they're not, because their skills are so advanced, are those the types of soldiers you would want helping Ukraine, the elite SAS soldiers, you want them?
Я не думаю. Я думаю, що наші
Well, we have a lot of training missions, and our military are in close contact. And I believe they have a very clear understanding as to how to proceed with those training missions.
Наших держав розбираються в цьому напрямку.
So that's a yes, you would like our best guys to help if we could give them.
Of course.
if I could turn to diplomatic
please.
and humanitarian support. And I just want to preface this question because 1/3 of Ukrainians forced from their homes, and I use the word forced because I know that Ukrainians don't want to leave. They want to stay in their home. But it's an act of humanitarianism right now for countries to be able to help, even offering temporary refuge. Are you grateful then for the Ukraine special visa that New Zealand has put in place that helps connect Ukrainians with Kiwi Ukrainians?
Важливо, що, по-перше, це зроблено. Це все одно.
Well, that's one step more towards the Ukrainians or in favor of Ukrainians, I would say, because it offers the capabilities, it offers the people with the possibility of making a choice. And indeed, we are grateful to New Zealand for making those special visas for Ukrainians. I don't have an information as to how many of Ukrainians have used these special visa possibilities with the New Zealand, because most of the people would go to Europe or to Poland, and Poland has hosted millions of Ukrainians. And I would say really that it's important that New Zealand has made this step. It's much better than those countries who did right the opposite, because some of the countries has imposed a visa regime, even though we didn't have a visa with them before the war.
Все одно ми за це вдячні. Це набагато краще, ніж деякі держави навпаки зробили спеціальну візу, а до цього у нас не було візового режиму з ними.
I can give you the numbers. It was supposed to help 4,000 Ukrainians, the visa. So far, only 289 Ukrainians have been able to make it to New Zealand on that visa. And a lot of New Zealand-based Ukrainians want that visa extended to extended family because it's too restrictive. It's too restrictive to just close family. Should the New Zealand government extend that visa?
По-перше, я ще раз хочу
Well, of course, I would like to say at first that we are very grateful for taking those steps in favor of our people. Still, I don't think that the number of Ukrainians who used this opportunity it did not depend on the exact conditions for receiving those visas, but on some other factors. And of course, it's fairly expensive to get to New Zealand. Besides, they might have lacking the information on how much money they would need to sustain themselves in New Zealand. So it's important to have a visa-free regime, but still there's much other issues on the table that are important, and the people maybe they need some more information, or they're lacking the contacts, because it's a long way to New Zealand, and that's important to have like a support and a special approach to them. But this financial issue, and including the cost of the aircraft tickets to New Zealand, also plays its role.
на це рішення.
Ukrainian-based New Zealander, her brother died fighting in Donbass. He has a niece in Kiev, but because she's her niece, she can't go to New Zealand because it's not for nieces or cousins, it's only for brothers, sisters, parents. And she is so desperate to help her niece, who is terrified and traumatized, to get to New Zealand, but she can't.
А ніс це хто? Племінниця. А можна тільки брати і сестри?
And she'll pay for it.
Вона готова за це заплатити,
I see. I see.
The visa is restrictive.
Такі умови.
It's hard for me to criticize any of the steps taken by the foreign governments, and I know that the foreign governments, in some cases, they're taking the difficult decisions, and whenever they're taking decisions as to the visa regime, they're afraid of many of a possible inflow of the people coming to their country. But I believe they shouldn't be afraid of an inflow of a significant number of Ukrainians Ukrainians to their countries because of, as I've said, this financial issues, the financial stability, the need of being sure about this. So maybe they shouldn't be that restrictive, considering that there is hardly a risk of a significant inflow of Ukrainians coming to New Zealand.
On a diplomatic level, our officials have expressed outrage at the war and called for a de-escalation of the conflict, but they haven't taken the strongest step they can. Should New Zealand kick out the Russian ambassador to New Zealand or Russian diplomats that are posted in New Zealand?
Нова Зеландія доєдналась до
the New Zealand have joined the sanctions policy, and we are grateful to the government of New Zealand for joining this sanctions policy. As for the Russian diplomats, of course, we would be happy if that would be the case, if Russian diplomats would be sent out of their country, because the more it happens around the world, the stronger we are, because it's all like steps in further isolation of Russia. Now, this is what would happen with you if you are going into war. I mean, so the people or in the countries would be turning away from you, from your society. So it's all part of the isolation. This is just like an example of further blocking Russia, of blocking visas being issued to its citizens, or considering Russia as a terrorist state.
Joe Biden and Boris Johnson are among the world leaders who have called Vladimir Putin a war criminal. Our Prime Minister has stopped short of calling him a war criminal. Do you think she should call him for what he is?
Я думаю, що це важливо для, напевно, це її рішення.
It's her decision to be taken, and really it's important because it means a lot for the society, and a lot of societies are considering Russia as a state aggressor, as the state as a terrorist state, and President Putin is considered as the leader of that terrorist state.
Я думаю, що
So it's important, but it's her decision. It's the decision of the government to be taking.
це така, і все ж таки за нею рішення.
You're a comedian and an actor, and you played a president. Now you are the president, a wartime president. Do you ever, in your quiet moments, reflect on how your life has ended up imitating art and just kind of think?
Так сталося. Так сталося. Це приблизно,
Well, it didn't happen by chance, because it was my decision to go for the presidentship and finally to be elected as the president.
цього зробити. Я не думав, що буде
So the more like how it all happened, I think this question should be addressed not to this situation, but how it all happened that over the years before becoming president, the countries, the leaders of the world allowed Russia to turn into such an autocratic regime,
абсолютно деспотичною державою.
resulting in this full-scale aggression against my country. Now, how it all happened that all those democracies, all those large democracies, maybe allowed this to happen.
Як великі демократії світу.
Maybe they were too democratic in their relationship to Russia.
Напевно, вони були дуже демократичними до Росії, до президента Путіна.
We visited Bucha, and the air
Thank you
is
so much.
heavy there. It still weighs on your heart when months on from the massacre there. When you think about that, what happened in Bucha, what happened more broadly in the war, the needless loss of life, women, men raped, tortured, executed. What would happen if you were alone in a room, no cameras, with Vladimir Putin?
Я б точно виконав.
I would use this situation.
Use it how?
I don't think I'm ready to tell you how. Hopefully, I would have this situation somewhere in future. If that would be the case, I'm not willing to prepare the other side for what would be my response to that.
I'm reading between the lines.
Дякую.
Thank you.